Welcome to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, a series of educational podcasts that showcase the connection between human capabilities and good work design, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the HFE Hub. It's so great to be with you. My name is Sharon Todd, and today I'm chatting with Andrew Imada. Now, Andrew is a macroergonomics consultant specialising in human and organisational change. He works with people and organisations to change their cultures, respond to scalability demands, and implements disruptive technologies. He helps them with these challenges by balancing organisational, safety, quality, and human needs. Well, Andy, it's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you again. I think it's several months since we spoke previously about the IEA publications, and it's so good to have you again. So thank you for joining me.
Good. Thank you. Great to be back.
Awesome. I think it's important to, last time when we spoke, we didn't speak a lot about you personally. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into consulting.
It was, like most of us in ergonomics, it's not a direct route. My background is in organizational psychology, and I was teaching at a very traditional university in psychology, and I joined the University of Southern California to teach their courses in organizational behavior and individual differences. And it was in a department called Human Factors, and say, by the way, you have to teach a course in Human Factors. And I said, all right, I've done job analysis and those things, I can do that. And I began teaching and ran into some colleagues who had very similar backgrounds, and they were very much into human factors and ergonomics. And I gradually drifted over away from the organizational psychology into this human factors and ergonomics. And after about 20 years at the university, I decided I was having a lot more fun away from work. So I decided to make consulting my work, and I could have more fun. And as many of us know who lived in universities, the politics can be brutal because when you fight about nothing, everything becomes important. And so I made a conscious decision to leave the university and to decide that I could actually make a living raising a family on my own, which perhaps was a foolish decision, but it seems to have worked out so far.
So when you talked about the fun bits, what were the fun bits?
I got to work with real people, working on real problems. And the things that we take for granted that we understand, they have never heard of. And they would say things like, you mean you have a name for what I'm feeling? Or what we're doing? And I said, yes, we have a name. And in fact, we have a way to deal with that. And they were so appreciative. And I was having such a good time working with them and getting their perspectives. And as you know, this is a very, very fluid, multidisciplinary organization where you get to work on all kinds of problems. So yeah, that was a lot of fun for me.
So I know that we're going to talk about your consulting, but what kind of projects were you working on?
I worked on a lot of different kinds of projects, from redesigning a food stand in a professional baseball organization. We designed a brand new truck for unloading fuel, and we had to redesign all the work processes around that. We implemented a warehouse management system into a traditional warehouse, and we trained not only the managers, but all of the workers to actually not be afraid of computers and work with the computers all the time. I've been involved with an SAP implementation. If any of you have heard of that, it's a very important feature in modern business. Let's see. The problem was so important, I actually redesigned an entire organization in a genomics lab. And I shut it down for 2 months. And anyway, those were fun projects, and they were exciting and sometimes risky, but that's why we do it.
So you obviously launched into consulting. So how did you start that? How did you get into organizations and become known and get this kind of work?
That's a great question. Everyone wants to know that because they don't hire you if you don't have any experience. So how do you get the experience? The entree has been through the hot topics of the day. When quality was big, everyone was looking for a quality consultant. When safety became important, when sustainability became important, there are ways to enter an organization through those kinds of labels. And I think we have to be flexible and to have a different nomenclature for the things that we do and to frame things so that they can see how we can help them. How do we get in? Two things. I was talking to a hairdresser once and I said, how do you get clients? And she said, oh, it was really easy for me. I gave a free demonstration at a sorority at the local university. And I gave them, all of them, free demos. And I did their faces and so on. And all you need is one person to call you. And that person will call a friend, and that person will call a friend. I never forgot that model. There used to be a commercial about that. One person will tell another, and that's a very powerful method. I think it's very important to give so you can get. And these are things like free talks in the communities, talks. Believe it or not, talks to Rotary clubs. Even I know some people who are joining Rotary clubs just so they can make contact with people in businesses, professional organizations, professional meetings. Some of my referrals came from students who said, wow, our company could use that. And it's just being open to the different kinds of opportunities. I think the best advice I have is, if you remember Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point? He said there are three kinds of people out there. The first is the maven, and the maven discovers the problem or discovers an idea, but doesn't know what to do with this idea. And what the maven does is it takes it to the second person, who is the connector. And the connector is the very important person because the connector knows everyone and what everyone's needs are and who's looking for what. And then the third person is the closer. The connector brings the problem to the closer, and the closer funds the problem or solves the problem. But the connector knows everyone. And I found that if I think about my career, there were probably two connectors that got me all my clients. We come in contact with someone and they like you and they go to the next organization and they keep talking about you. Because I don't know if you've met this person, Sharon, but it's sort of like, hey, you were just telling me about this problem. I was just talking to somebody. Why don't we get together for lunch? And that person is extremely valuable in making connections and getting entree into different organizations.
I so agree. Networking is how I've consulted myself. And my husband always used to say to me, there's an awful lot of lunches in your life. And I've said I've learned so much from lunches, not just what was on the menu. So yes, it's so true. And someone that you meet now will pop up later in life, gives you an opportunity to even employ them on a job later. So I understand
that. Absolutely.
So tell me how you have integrated human factors into your consulting.
I have often found is that when it's usually management that hires you, and management has predefined the nature of the problem. They'll say, what we need is for you to come in here and train these people so they can do their job safely and we can eliminate the accident. And you agree and you nod, but that is only one interpretation of the problem. And in human factors, I think what we do is we take a systems perspective of the problem and not look at a singular cause. And I think that is a huge advantage for us, is that we are able to integrate different aspects or different perspectives into the problem. And I think that's very valuable. If you go back to our notion of human factors and what human factors is. What we do is we optimize both system effectiveness and human well-being. I mean, who can argue with that? But it's the ability to think about both of those simultaneously. I think that is extremely valuable, and understand the perspectives of both sides. And one of the things the management is always concerned about is a successful enterprise. So that means profits. And they'll tell me, the only thing the workers are is they're interested in their own well-being. And I said, is that a reasonable thing to do? Of course it is. Who would come to work and not want to be safe? And the workers say, all the company wants to do is make a profit. And I said, don't you think that's a reasonable thing to do? Because without that profitable organization, we don't have jobs, do we? And I think it's just our ability to look at both sides of the problem and not just look at where they are pointing that allows us to find different kinds of solutions to problems, not just the standard ones. It is the typical Einsteinian comment, right? That insanity is trying to do the same things over and over. Like we've trained you many, many times and you still don't get it. And my suggestion is, well, why don't we stop? Let's try something different. Well, what do we try? And this is where our perspective can be very helpful because we have this multidisciplinary approach. We can identify, in our language, proximal and distal causes to the problem that they may not be able to envision or even have thought of in their past. So I think that's a huge advantage for us in terms of looking at the problems and frankly, not knowing anything about genomics was actually helpful because you ask questions of a novice, like a novice, and you actually learn a lot during these lunches.
You do, because I was going to ask, what is genomics?
Oh, this is the DNA sequencing that they use, and this lab was sequencing plants, and they were trying to find the characteristics of plants to create more efficient fuels. I actually don't know what they were doing. I just know they were creating these sequences, and they were doing 2 billion base pairs a year. And they said, do you know how much that is a month? And you're going to shut us down for a month?
Okay, well, it sounds like an amazing project. Really, I love it when you've got to work somewhere where you know nothing about it when you start. It's
absolutely
it's exciting. So do you have any favorite tools or systems or methods that you always use that have been tried and tested for you?
My particular area, that I've written about is something called participatory ergonomics, and it's the engagement of many of the parties, the interested parties, to come up with understand and come up with the solutions. So the engagement of many people, not just the expert, is something that I've always really relied on very heavily on. Because the workers know the problems, they know the pains. Sometimes they're not allowed to try things differently, or sometimes they're unwilling to do it. But getting their perspective is extremely useful. That requires a skill to be able to get to know workers. So one of my very first example, when I was still at the university, I gave a talk and I said, we need to get these mechanics together and bring them together because I think they have something to say. And so we need to teach them some skills. And I took my typical professorial class to this workshop, and a man in the front row at the end of the first day walked up to me with a piece of paper and said, these are all the words that you use that I have no idea what they mean. And it was the best example for me to say, you have to know your audience. You don't know who these people are, and you don't know how to talk to them. So you have to find a way to relate to them so they can appreciate what you're saying, and that you're not this foreigner that never mind a spaceship, but he is foreign. He has nothing to do with us as mechanics and people who get our hands dirty every day. And so that was a really good learning point for me to say, you have to speak their language. You have to be there with them. Despite what your credentials are, they actually don't care. They want to know that you are sincerely interested in solving their problem. And once you can do that, that's very useful.
So there's unique skills that we have as human factors professionals. What are some of the other skills that we haven't talked about yet that you bring to organizations that create competitive advantage?
It's all about relationships, and the relationships you can develop with the enterprise owner, the manager in charge, the person doing the work that you need to get their input on. And that relationship is always grounded for me in two things. It's trust and respect. Respect that you know what you're talking about and that maybe you know something more than I do. And trust that I can tell you and that you're here to help me. I work very hard on that, to develop that relationship, so that we can get to this point where they will tell me things that I actually need to know, or that they may have never told anyone else. And it's just really flattering when I feel so honored when you reach that moment where people are telling you things and I can't believe you just told me that. Our good friend David Capel has a question he asks people, and particularly the enterprise owners and champions. What is it you really worry about at night? What keeps you up at night? And if someone will tell you that, that is really a relationship. If you can build to that, you will understand their motivations for why they do the things that they do. And I think that trust is so valuable, because the respect comes with, well, you know how to measure this? You can measure that in parts per million? Well, what's this thing do? And you know big words. That's a lot of respect. But the trust to me is really important. And that trust comes, I have found, in the way we interact with people, but primarily through listening to them, and not only the words that they're saying, but the deeper meanings of those words. That gets to the motivations of what people do. And I assume the role of a novice is just saying, why does that matter? And asking questions and showing a real curiosity about why people feel the way they do. It is really, really important. It gets to those base levels of motivation and trust. It can really help you.
So tell me about some of the challenges for you with the projects that you've worked on.
Because we don't know many of or all of the options, we have to be listening and open to all of their options. So as I mentioned, one of the things that people say is, well, you taught, you should be a good teacher. Why don't you come and train our people? This is one alternative solution. Keeping in mind an open perspective that there are many solutions and many perspectives to this problem is very important to keep open. And I often say that the problem you name is the problem that you will solve. If you name the wrong problem, we will have the perfect solution that doesn't fit the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think the more tools that we can bring with us, the more successful we can be. And that comes with experience. It comes with education. It comes from working with other people when you see their techniques. And it helps you to become more robust in your solutions. Because if you only have one solution, if the hammer is the tool you have, everything looks like a nail. I think the other thing is to understand the cultures that you are working in. And when you enter a new organization, you're looking around, looking for cues about what I always say, that ask myself, what is the God that they worship? So if it's a finance organization, I can tell you where they are looking. If it's an engineering organization, the accuracy is very important. If it's a sales organization, it's about customer service and top line revenue. If it's a safety culture, there are different things that you look for, and you need to be able to speak their language and adapt. And I think one of the big challenges when people cannot adapt to that or learn the language quickly enough, use the language and address their problems rather than, one of the classic is I would be in an audience and a university person would come in and say, well, what we need is some studies here. And I'm thinking, they don't need studies. They need a solution. There's a design freeze coming and they need to know, is it this or is it that? Or give them some parameter. Our science and our education is simply a vehicle for us to deliver results. How you get that, they are often not interested. What they're interested in is, can you deliver something that is not perfect, but usable? And if you can do that, I think you'd be extremely valuable. I have the good fortune for having very long-term clients. I've probably only had maybe 4 or 5 real clients in my entire lifetime. But I stay with them for a very long time. And people ask, how do you stay? And well, they usually invite me in because they have a safety problem, for example. And we know how to solve those safety problems. But because you raise different alternatives or give them different perspectives, they understand that you know more than just the safety. And if they can trust you, they will keep you and continue with different kinds of projects. And that's sort of the way that I've been working, is just keep working on projects, and different things come up and they say, hey, do you know about this? Can you help us with this? And they never ask, what are your qualifications for doing this? Because I have none.
Well, that's not true. Actually, I was just thinking on your statement earlier about focusing on the wrong thing means you come up with the wrong answer. And I'm always blown away when you map something out and use a tool or a process and it goes in an entirely different direction to what you may have thought. And it'll pinpoint something, hopefully. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. But I'm always amazed when you pinpoint something that was so not what you thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point, Sharon, because you have to have the humility to back out and say, I didn't actually think about that. Or I'm not sure I phrase it that way, but to say, yes, this is a good solution that I had not come in with. That's a great idea. And that's the humility that it requires.
We had a member of our society who's no longer with us, David Brown. He was a psychologist, in fact. And he used to say to me when I first finished my degree and I came out and sort of said, I'm worried about what I don't know because there's so much that I don't know. And he said, apart from obviously he agreed to help me and mentor me if I needed it, he said, look, Sharon, we don't always have the answer. And it's better to come in and say, look, I don't know what the answer to this is, but we'll work on this together. And I've always held on to that.
Absolutely. That is great advice. That's great advice, because that's when they develop trust in you, because you say, I don't have all the answers. One of my favorite lines, it's from an old Buddhist line, is, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. You have to be very aware or scared of people who have all the answers.
Good point. I never have all the answers, never. I'm sure that in your career there have been some huge learnings. I'm just wondering what the biggest learnings for you were.
I was asked to give a talk to a meatpacking company about their safety problem. And I chose to present the problem about a different industry. And there was a translator, and they was speaking in Spanish, and there was simultaneous, I was speaking English, and there was simultaneous translation. And the line that I saw get the most laughs or the greatest response was when I said, the supervisors told me that they had no idea how to solve this problem in the case that I was saying. And everyone reacted because they understood the truth that we're supposed to improve safety, but we actually don't know how to improve safety. What we know how is to cut meat and to increase productivity. So that was one of the moments when you speak the truth and people latch on to that, and they say, okay, you've told us what we actually feel. And speaking the truth is very, very important. Now, what is that truth? I can't tell you what that truth is, except what I know and what I see. And I tell them what I see, and hopefully they'll listen. When you first walk into an organization, no one wants to say, your posture is terrible. You're going to get back problems. I bet your neck really hurts at night, doesn't it? Stupid. No one wants to be told that. And I think I learned something from a good friend of mine, Kazutaka Kogi, who did a lot of work in the Far East. And to get people to understand their bad postures or their bad work processes, he would come in and talk about the process, what they're there to fix. And he would go around taking pictures of people, those Polaroid pictures that used to be, and before we had video cameras. And then he would post them up and use them as study groups, like, so make sure that the body is in a neutral body position. He would take a picture of somebody stooped over, and everyone would have a chance to laugh at, because they knew the fella, and they saw, look at you, and they had a chance to see themselves, to see the truth that, yes, posture is important. Yeah, I know that. But in a humorous way, so that it's not threatening, that he had the men go around and take pictures of each other, and they were making fun of each other in the way that only work colleagues can do. I think that loosened them up to say, that is the truth. We have bad posture, as opposed to someone coming in with a ruler and saying, you need to move your elbow this far. There are also nonverbal ways to convey this truth. I think I have used this technique, and Karen Langer-Morales, who was with us in the other podcast, has also used this. Someone once told me, Andy, the reason that these men are where they are because they did not do well in school. So if you make them write something down, they will remember the school days and they won't write anything. So one of the things that I have done in instances is to get people to draw the problem as they see it. I give them a whole bunch of markers and a whole bunch of paper, and I said, draw it. And everyone says, I can't draw. And I said, I know, but you're not graded on your artistic ability. But getting them to express their concerns and their in a different modality allows them to do it outside of the verbal, written context that we are accustomed to, that we typically analyze problems in. In that way, they can see the truth. They can see a different reality. So those are big challenges for me. And sometimes when I say, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go around and take pictures of each other. We're going to sit down and draw. And people think, well, this is a silly bit of nonsense. But I have found that to be very helpful. And sometimes what that truth is comes out very clearly in a picture.
So, Andy, what's next for you, Andy?
I have really enjoyed mentoring others in the work organization, the people who are striving to get ahead and accomplish things. And they will call me and ask, what do you think about this? Or how do you think I should approach that? And because I've never climbed the corporate ladder, I just end up asking them questions. And they keep coming back for more questions. But I think, and it's not just to deflect the answer, but I really enjoy helping them achieve in their careers. And even in our profession, working with people on their research projects or their writing, it's a real joy for me to be a part of that and get their publications in. And publications do me no good, but it will help them. And I really enjoy that, getting them to think through their research issues or their formulation of a problem, or their writing is that's very rewarding for me at this point. And while I'm still doing some writing and still doing some consulting, it's nice to be helping others. Someone once told me there are 3 facets in your career. In the first phase, you figure out what a string is. And the second part, you pull strings to get ahead. And the final phase, you get your string pulled.
Is there a project that you would love to have worked on that you didn't have the opportunity to work on?
Oh, let's go to the first one. I think that when you are striving, and we all are in some different phase of striving, you get very engaged in your work, which is a very good thing because it makes the time go faster. You accomplish things. And I can now see by the people that I work with who are striving and the current demands that they have on their lives, how important work-life balance is. And especially in our times when it is a 24/7 workday, we are accessible at all times. We weren't always on the clock as people are now. But I could see how spending more time on other aspects besides work could have been very much more valuable. And I learned this later on in life when I started volunteering. And that volunteer work actually taught me a lot about myself and about others, and could have been very valuable to my work as a professional. And so I think if we stop being so unidimensional and think about that striving as only in the professional realm, I think we lose out on the kind of the richness that life gives us and the kinds of lessons that we can learn from many people. Not only the people who are smarter, wealthier, and stronger than we are, but maybe it's just quite the opposite. And I've learned a lot that way and wish I had probably done more of that. But
thanks for joining us at the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, where human-centred design really matters. If you like this podcast, make us your favourite in your podcast app. We look forward to chatting with you next time.